During this time, women were expected to focus on housework and motherhood, not politics. Married women couldn't own property and had no legal claim to any money that they might have earned. Many women believed that it was their right and duty to take a serious part in politics. They realized that political decisions affected their daily lives. There was a widespread attitude that men's and women's votes did not cross. In North Carolina, the opponents of women's suffrage claimed women were not the equal of men mentally, and that allowing them to vote would take them out of their proper sphere of life. Millions of American women got to vote for the first time on Election Day in 1920. On August 18, 1920, the 19th Amendment to the Constitution was finally ratified. Women finally got all the rights and responsibilities of men after 100 years of trying to win the rights. The women were slow to use their rights, but by the end of the decade, women were represented on local, state, and national political committees. They began to focus on social improvement, such as protective laws for the child labor and prison reform. The women were active in politics in 1929, yet still had little power, but had begun the long journey to actual political equality.
Women's fashions in the early 1920s experienced dramatic changes following the end of the First World War, in a period often referred to as the Roaring Twenties, the era of the flapper. The passing of bustles and corsets gave clothing designers much greater freedom of expression, resulting in innovative styling. Women dressing in the new and colorful fabrics echoed the joy felt by war-weary population following the end of hostilities. 1920s dresses were lighter and brighter and shorter than ever before. Fashion designers played with the fabric, colors, textures, and patterns to create totally new styles of dresses. Evening dresses, coats, and jackets were often trimmed with fur. The hairstyles of Hollywood stars were copied by women all over the world, and women's magazines carried articles on how to achieve the current look. Hairstyles were much shorter than the previous decade, and styles like finger waving, the Marcel wave, and permanent waving were in vogue. Floppers, as a trendy young woman were called in the U.S., wore short dresses with a straight, loose silhouette. By 1927, seams had risen to just below the knees, so that part of the knee could be seen when dancing, the Charleston. This being said, the Roaring Twenties redefined womanhood. As new women evolved, it became more acceptable to smoke and drink in public. Closer body contact and dancing, shorter hair, makeup, different styles of dresses, and greater participation in the workforce all contributed to the new woman.
Women began with the role of the traditional housewife. During World War I, an increase of 25% of women began working, taking on roles such as factory workers, secretaries, sales clerks, and telephone operators. Before the decade of the 1920s, women were only known to be housewives. When World War I began, the need for women to work increased. Young and single women were the first to get jobs. Then widows, divorcees, and poorly married women followed shortly after that. Women were held to a lower standard than men, so they were paid much less. She could be doing the exact same job as a man and be lucky to get paid half his salary. Women's jobs also required much more labor and were usually in more of a dangerous workplace. There were many types of job women had. There were caretakers, cooks, servants, spousal helpers, nannies, maids, midwives, tailors, ironers, and ones who grow crops and tend livestock. The most common job for a woman was at a factory due to World War I. When the chance came, which rarely did, women would go to college and get degrees. Then some could even get jobs as social workers, fashion, nursing, journalism, lawyers, and doctors. Women in the workplace were referred to as pink collar because men were white and blue collar. Women were given feminine jobs because people thought it was necessary.
The 1920s and the 1930s brought women more educational and career opportunities. In the 19th century, only 19% of college degrees were granted to women. In 1928, that number rose quite a bit to 39%. The number of educated women continued to grow. Even though there were economic hardships that followed the Great Depression was tough for women employees. But by 1938, 800,000 women belonged to the unions. The number of women increased as war production increased through those years. North Carolina's female high school students didn't expect to go to college, and if they did, they would usually attend a private school or a women's college that did not include male students. Most of the students would become teachers or nurses. These were considered suitable professions for women. North Carolina State College enrolled its first woman student in 1921, but not until 1926 the women could graduate. In 1928, only 21 women enrolled there. The University of North Carolina opened housing to female graduate students in 1921, but they were not considered welcome. Not many women earned degrees in the 1920s, but as time went on, more women went on to earn college degrees.